Cornwall Disability Alliance presents Accessibility and Inclusion in Landscape Design. When you think of a landscape or outside area you enjoy, what do you think of?
Hello, my name is Ewan Morris. I'm actually the chair of Mid Cornwall Lifestyles and have been since the very beginning, back in 1999. I'm into sort of history and historical buildings and things like that, so from a personal perspective it's those sort of areas, and also again beach areas. It'll be good to make them more accessible than they are, but from a personal perspective, I mean going to be able to go out to these different buildings, different areas, sort of be able to get around them like everybody else.
Steve Hollier, Founding Director of easyAccessibility.
So I'm the co-inventor of the roommate device, which gives audible description to visually impaired people using disabled access toilets. Well, my passion, my hobby is fishing. I run my own fishing boat from a beach, Cadgwith in Cornwall, and that is my environment. That's where I go every day, and the whole environment changes every day because things are moved and there's all sorts of things around to fall over. That is my environment.
My name is Dominic and I'm iSightCornwall's Assistive Technology Advisor. I like the Eden project. I've been there many times, and it's a good mix of both outdoor landscape and the indoor biomes.
Hi, my name is Melissa King. I am the clinical lead and a specialist neurophysio at the Merlin Centre in Cornwall. I feel really passionate about supporting people with disabilities to be able to access the outside area safely and to be confident and feel that they will be able to do the things that they want to do, whether it's accessing local towns and villages or whether it is pushing the boundaries a little bit more and being able to go to the beach with their families, go on the coast path if it's possible, and finding locations that are suitable as well for our client group and people that we work with.
What are the challenges that first come to mind that you or other people living with a long-term health condition or disability face?
Hello, I'm Clare Greenwood from here in West Cornwall. Well, I personally am lucky. I don't have to make considerations, and I've become more aware of that over time. When I'm working with deaf people, I listen to things that I don't even need to think about. So an example being the camel trail in Cornwall, for example. If you're walking along there, a deaf person will not hear the cyclists coming up behind, so that can be quite dangerous. They won't hear dogs coming up behind them. They literally sort of not hearing potential dangers that are around them.
I've said really, it's when things are moved. If it was always the same every day, then I would soon know where everything is, but everything's moving every day. So it's just a learning process every day. I have to use my sense of feel and my hearing to know where things are. If it's pouring a rain, then I've got white noise that's detracting from my sense of hearing, so I do find when it's raining it's much more difficult to know where I am.
Basically the challenges mainly are getting around the place safely. The Eden project is good, for example, because we at iSightCornwall have actually assisted them in the past with their accessibility and inclusion for the visually impaired. So they do have, we have to worry about steps, we have to worry about slopes, inclines. We have to think about areas where things like, unbarricaded water or pitfalls or anything like that. Stuff like that, essentially. The unknown, pretty much.
I mean, it's a general thing, really. The problem you have is everybody's disability is different, so everybody's problems are going to be different. So I can only speak from a personal perspective on my disability. Heaven forbid I'd speak on somebody about it that was blind. I would have no idea. Certainly I could empathise, but I couldn't tell you what that experience is like. Or somebody that's deaf even, Somebody in a wheelchair, you might arrive somewhere and they've got a car park there, and you arrive and they say this is the disabled area, and they've got it covered in gravel, which you spend the next 5 minutes wheel spinning trying to get places, you know what I mean? They say, oh, it's wheelchair friendly, but you've got to get through this gravel first, People that usually design these things are able-bodied people, which is your fundamental problem. So they come from it from an able-bodied perspective, not a disability perspective. But very simply, that is your problem, really.
John Sweeting, manager of Activate.
I think part of a challenge around the outdoor landscape is firstly knowing when they go to places what the access is going to be like. That starts with the knowledge and information that they can gain before visiting a venue. So that could be down to the website being accessible. From that as well, having accessibility information on the website. A lot of places just have a generic, our place is accessible, and that's the extent of it. It doesn't give any detail or explanations of what that means. What is accessible to one person could be totally different to the next person.
Why should all design processes start with accessibility?
Because it allows inclusion of everybody. You want your area that's going to be used by the public to be inclusive. You want as many people as to use it and to access it. It might enrich everyone's lives.
I think it's really important that disabilities are considered in all design processes. For starters, we know the massive impact that access to outside areas and access to different areas provides opportunities for improving mental health, improving physical health. If places are inaccessible straight away, that's just increasing the divide of what people are able to achieve, where they're able to go, and whether that's going to the theatre or going to the cinema or going to the sea. People need to know that they will be able to have their needs met.
The obvious answer is that we should all be treated equally. Everybody has that right to the outdoors if they can access it, and it's up to us to try and help people access whatever they can, whatever age, whatever stage in their life, whoever they are. We should all have that same opportunity.
Because it allows everybody to experience the same thing. If you go into designing somewhere and have that right at the very beginning, make it accessible for everybody for different types of disability, it allows all types of society to experience the same thing at the same time. Whereas, making it accessible at a later date may have to change the experience for somebody.
Because everybody in society should be included. I do feel that when they design things, that tend to forget visually impaired people. There's a lot of signage around, visual signage. This doesn't mean anything to us, so we need more audible signs. And we've got audible around us all the time. For lorries reversing, you get an audible sign, audible instructions in lifts and railway stations and things like that. If we could have more of that in specifically dangerous places.
What do you think places often forget in terms of accessibility?
When it comes to accessibility, a lot of people think of the obvious couple, which are making sure there's accessible toilets and making sure there are ramps available, whether that's a static ramp or one that can be removed. But there is so much more to having an accessible facility. Having hearing loops included within the building itself, changing places, facilities, contrasting colours for those with visual impairments.
All the senses, we need to think about, we all have our natural senses and we need to be addressing all of those senses. So hearing, sight, touch, everything like that should be a consideration throughout any project, and that's the same whether it's indoors or outdoors. So safety first is obviously going to be a major thing for people with deafness. Some of those safety issues are not actually really thought about until somebody addresses the issue and complains, by which time it might be too late.
The one I always notice, particularly when they have a disabled toilet, is that they'll basically redesign a cupboard. So you'll go in there, you can't even get your wheelchair in there, or you can get in the wheelchair in there, but you can't close the door. You very rarely find a very large disabled toilet.
Normal disabled toilet, you just expected to go in there and feel your way around. You want to know first how they lock the door, and then where the toilet is, and then what sort of flush it uses, where the wash basin is after that, and then where the hand dryer is, and then finally where the door is to get out. And up till now, that's never been catered for. And it's things like this which need to be thought up. If everybody puts a blindfold on and then puts themselves into a situation, they'll soon realise that what sort of pitfalls we're up against.
They often forget there basically one fix won't solve all. Like, for example, having a Braille information guide will help all visually impaired people. That's not the case, because less than 1% of visually impaired people can read Braille these days. Not everyone's blindness is the same, so you will need multiple, levels of accessibility, depending on the visitor's requirements.
Why do you believe it's important to work with people with lived experience to design and create spaces?
I think it's really important that people are empowered to take control and have involvement in the spaces that are being designed and developed. As someone who doesn't have a long-term condition, realistically, my perspective on the challenges is not going to be as accurate and detailed as someone who's actually experiencing those problems, accessing environments day to day. It broadens your perspective on actually, you know what, there's a lot of things that aren't considered and need to be considered.
My name's Ed Whitefield. I'm CEO of Mid Cornwall Lifestyles. I believe it really is important to have, ideally, a range of people with different backgrounds, different abilities, who can give a broad perspective on what accessibility means for individuals. Talking to one of our trustees who is a powered wheelchair user about a venue for a meeting and hopefully for a Christmas party. On the surface, it seems well set up as an accessible venue for people. However, it's pointed out that the toilets really aren't adequate for a powered wheelchair user. This particular person struggled a couple of times that we visited this place. He hadn't raised it previously, but he raised it this time, and it's a valid point. This is a common theme, certainly from the experience of two of our trustees. So it's really important, I suppose, to have as diverse a group and as big a group of people feeding into planning and accessibility.
Because they know the problems that we go through. We shouldn't design one situation to the detriment of somebody, another disability. And I think that happens quite a lot. It's very difficult to design something for all disabilities, I feel, but at the end of the day you've got to compromise and try and cover everything.
You're talking to people that actually know what they're talking about. A lot of these places are designed by people who haven't got disabilities. The thing that you really need is a group of people with differing disabilities. There's no point in having a group with 5 wheelchair users. You have a deaf person, you have a blind person, you have a wheelchair user. Get them in a group and get them to go to different places, look at what they're designing and look at what they're proposing and have their input.
If you don't live in somebody else's shoes, you literally don't know what faces them. So it's really important to ask the questions first, not rethink everything afterwards. We've had some of our deaf people go out to visit different locations, and it's fascinating the impact that has, what they come back with, things that maybe somebody who hasn't got sensory loss wouldn't even consider.
Because they are the people that will give you the most information and the most useful guidance for making your space, your project, fully inclusive or accessible.
What would you like to see change about the way landscapes are designed?
Obviously you can't change nature per se, but if you are working in a landscape area where there's masses of coastline, massive cliff, arguably you can't probably fence all that area off, but it may well be a good opportunity to think about creating an area, like a safety area where you could get a wheelchair to and they have a nice lookout point.
Consult as many organisations and individuals as possible that represent those different disabilities and sensory loss conditions, and obviously the most important thing is, take their advice to heart. Don't just do it to tick off a box to say we've consulted someone. Actually pay attention to the support and the guidance given.
The most important part is making sure that accessibility isn't an add-on at the end or isn't an afterthought for a development. It should be incorporated all the way through the process. People with lived experience involved in that is the best way to understand the needs and requirements of the disabled community.
When new spaces are designed, accessibility is considered, and that accessibility has to be considered from a range of different areas. We need to think about people with mobility difficulties from a walking perspective, people that use elbow crutches or walking sticks or walking frames, or they use mobility scooters, or they use powered wheelchairs, or they use manual wheelchairs. So there's a whole range of ways that people mobilise and get around, and if we only think of one of those things, then we're not actually reaching everybody's needs. And why shouldn't people be able to access spaces if they're being newly designed and newly developed?
Do you have any tips for designing spaces that are inclusive and accessible to everyone?
In terms of designing it, allow maybe some details to go on the internet or something so somebody can look it up, know where they're going, know the accessible areas before they get there. So make available to somebody things where their carer or themselves can look up and say, well, we can go there, but we can't go there. Because you can turn up to these places, you'll suddenly find that you've spent all this money out on a ticket and you can only go to about half of it.
Be consistent. What you found works, really well for a disability, use again. Don't change things that have been established. For example, we've had a situation where recently they've been putting tactile crossing point pavement, tactile pavement in to mark crossing points in, and not actually putting a crossing point in, which is confusing to visually impaired cane users like myself, because we feel the tactile pavement. We then start looking for a crossing, and there isn't one to cross.
I think my biggest tip is definitely to do really good research. When it came to designing this amazing space, really went out and looked at the environments that we wanted to replicate. We've got Cornish stone, we've got cobbles, we've got sand, we've got stiles, we've got grass. We wanted to provide the opportunities to build people's confidence in areas that are really specific around Cornwall.
Working with hearing loss again, visual prompts are always the thing. They're not going to actually hear something coming. So if you know that you're promoting a landscape area where there are potential hazards, potential dangers that you would rely on you hearing, then signage is going to be important, because you just don't hear where things are coming from. It might sound a bit obvious, but that really is keeping people safe.
Consult as many organisations and individuals as possible that represent those different disabilities and sensory loss conditions, and obviously the most important thing is take their advice to heart. Actually listen properly to it. Don't just do it to tick off a box to say we've consulted someone. Actually pay attention to the support and the guidance given.
It's important to try and make a venue step-free, visually and acoustically friendly, and so that places don't echo, but they also have colour contrasts from floors to walls to doors.
What does inclusion mean to you?
Social inclusion means that trying to cater for everybody. Myself, I wouldn't go into an environment where I'm unfamiliar with it without help from somebody else, because there are just too many dangers involved.
Acceptance in an environment, feeling accepted within an environment, being able to go to the doctors when you wanted to, and use facilities and be accepted within that environment. Because you can go to a lot of places and you get funny looks from people, but to feel accepted in yourself, that you're feeling being made welcome in those areas.
It's a key element of what we try to do as Mid Cornwall Lifestyles. It's really to help people be part of society, whether that's accessing actual physical locations, or if it's by accessing a physical location, meeting up with people and being socially included. And I think that's a big part of it, where we're talking about accessibility to actually get to a place, get into a place, but it's what happens when you're there. Do you feel part of that group? Are you recognised as being someone who has rights and is welcome in a space and an environment?
So my tip would be to speak to disabled users or organisations that work with people with disabilities to get their views and their opinions and ideas about the best course of action for making a place accessible.
Equity means that everyone needs different things in order to have equal opportunities. What are the most important parts of equitable spaces for you?
I think literally the freedom to enjoy the space safely, so thinking about all the safety issues that are around that can affect different people with different conditions. If you feel safe, you enjoy life. If you don't feel safe, you're not supported, then fear, stress, all those come in. So you want people to just literally enjoy their space.
Equity basically allows you to suit that individual's needs. So it's going back to that thing I said about thinking that Braille is a be-all and fix-all for visual impairment, where less than 1% actually have the ability to read it. Just because a person has a condition, it's not going to be universal for everyone with that condition.
For us here at Activate, what would make our life an awful lot easier is having knowledge before visiting sites, be that through the website or any other communications we have with a place. We hear an awful lot of the time our place is accessible, and then you arrive and there's 3 steps into the door and they haven't got a ramp to be able to do it. So I think nice, clear clarification on access is an important part.
That some people do need more help than others to access spaces. I think what's really exciting is there's a lot of collaboration going on down here. If we can do our best by working with other partners and other organisations to give people the best opportunities to explore and to access outdoor areas.
How does social inclusion benefit not only people living with a long-term health condition or disability, but everyone?
If you've got it right, it allows all society to be able to access anything. And of course what you want is to all of society to be in together, you know, because it allows them to everybody to expand all of society. So which has got to be a good thing, that you're allowing all of society to get involved, whatever it is, whether it's being able to access organisations, access environments, so on and so forth.
Social inclusion means that no one's left behind and everyone is included, and I think it supports building tolerance and understanding and supporting everybody to all be able to look out for each other, and everyone will be able to help each other a little bit more, and people will be able to feel empowered to ask for support when they need it, but also say, you know what, no, I've got this.
It means that the person that I'm with, I'm quite often with somebody else helping me if I'm in unfamiliar surroundings. It means that they feel a lot easier if our needs are catered for, because the person who's looking after you has got to look after themselves as well as think of what you're doing. I mean,
what are your thoughts on the ongoing process of inclusion?
It's evolving all the time as we think of new ideas.
Inclusion's an ongoing process because they're evolution essentially. It's always changing. We learn more about people's long-term disability or sensory loss, as we try and cater for as many different conditions as possible.
I think it's important that it's a dynamic process. It's something that is always going to evolve, always going to adapt to the needs and requirements of people, not only with people but also time and finances as well. A new facility, for example, isn't going to be able to necessarily spend lots and lots of money on their access, but being able to improve it over time, it's an important thing to not just think about in its infancy but throughout the longevity of a programme or a facility.
Life changes, the world around us changes every single day, so processes that worked 5 years ago, 5 months ago may not work now, so it's a constant review of everything that we do, every service that's around us, every space that we live in is constant change, and we just need to keep working on that inclusion element.
iSightCornwall is the oldest charity in Cornwall, so I think we've got plenty of experience of the problems that visually impaired people come up against, and we're the ideal people to ask for advice as when you're designing any urban or environmental design.
Well, being Cornwall's oldest charity for sight loss, we have a lot of experience in all levels of sight loss, whether it be very mild short-sightedness all the way to black blind, like myself. Basically, we can advise urban designers and people who are building attractions in Cornwall. We can advise them and, some guidelines to kind of cater to all levels of visual impairment. We have done so for several urban designers and public entertainment spaces around Cornwall. Put them in the right direction, essentially.
The Merlin Centre started as a charity for people with multiple sclerosis. Over the years, we've started diversifying and working with a broader population. So we've worked with people with other neurological conditions. The more we talk about what different organisations are offering, and the more we share our knowledge and work together, both in the voluntary sectors and in the NHS and other statutory services, the more we collaborate and work together. At the heart of it all is the clients. And we need to make sure that at the end of everything, they are the heart of our decision-making process.
It's what Mid Cornwall Lifestyles is part of its ethos, part of what it does. It allows disabled people and their parents or carers to experience things. We want the individual to be able to plan their own life.
Essentially, we support deaf people in many, many different ways, and one of the main things we do is advocacy, literally being the voice of the deaf person who may not be able to voice things themselves. So it's that sharing of information, sharing of knowledge, sharing of feedback, and that is a constant process. We're hearing different things all the time, and we're constantly reviewing how we can get that message across to society in general.
This process of inclusion and being an ongoing process, I think, is certainly that, sort of bringing in a wider range of people to have a view. From our point of view as an organisation, we encourage our clients and trustees to be involved, to have their voices included.
Everything changes. Everything changes. It's something that was done 10 years ago might not be good now, you know, because the environment changes, people change, people's abilities change, disabilities change. So you constantly need to update things. You constantly need to look at things. It's an ongoing process, particularly with what you're the landscaping and design. Everything's an ongoing process.
Produced by Discover Voices, part of Disability Cornwall and Isles of Scilly.